Okay, so you know when you're like really trying to stay up on like all the health stuff, and that you suddenly find yourself drowning in all these articles and studies and like
Right.
all these different opinions.
Yeah.
It's like what you really need is someone to be like, okay, this is the good stuff.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is the important part.
Yeah. Cut through the noise.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what we're doing today.
Yeah.
We are going on a deep dive into something called primary biliary cholangitis,
Okay.
or PBC for short.
PBC.
And just to give you a quick overview, PBC is a chronic condition where the bile ducts in your liver,
Yeah.
they basically get damaged.
Right.
And that can cause bile to back up,
Yes.
which leads to inflammation. And over time, it can even lead to like scarring of the liver.
Yeah. That's a really good way to put it. And, you know, the thing is, while we have a standard treatment for PBC, it's called ursodeoxycholic acid, or UDCA.
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 Got it.
It doesn't work for everybody. I mean, many people do very well on it, especially if they start it early.
Right.
But there's a subset of people who continue to see their condition progress.
Yeah.
And for those folks, the search for other options becomes really vital.
Absolutely. And that's why I think this deep dive is so interesting.
Yeah.
Today, we're looking at a case report.
Okay.
Exploring whether adding molecular hydrogen capsules could help in managing PBC.
Interesting.
So our source material is a scientific paper titled Molecular Hydrogen Capsule Therapy for Primary Biliary Cholangitis with Elevated IgG4, a case report on immune marker normalization.
Wow.
It's a very specific title.
Very specific.
But it's going to be really interesting, I think.
I'm sure.
So today our mission is to try to understand what this research suggests about how we might better manage PBC.
Okay.
Especially for those who aren't getting the full benefits from current treatments.
Right.
And really, we just want to try to like extract the most interesting and important insights for you.
Excellent.
From this research. So, okay, let's dive a little bit deeper into PBC itself.
Sure.
So can you maybe just walk us through a little bit more detail about like what's happening in the body with this disease?
Sure. So imagine your liver has this network of tiny tubes.
Okay.
These are your bile ducts. And they're carrying bile, which is essential for digesting fats.
Right.
Now, in PBC, your immune system mistakenly attacks and damages these small ducts. When that happens, the bile can't flow properly and it gets backed up.
Oh.
That's cholestasis.
Okay.
This buildup causes inflammation, and over time, that inflammation can lead to scarring of the liver tissue. Or fibrosis.
Fibrosis.
Yeah. In more advanced cases, it can unfortunately progress to cirrhosis, which is severe late-stage liver damage.
That sounds like a cascade of problems.
It is.
And it's really interesting that, you know, what's still a little bit of a puzzle is why this immune system attack happens in the first place.
Right.
So the paper mentioned that it's likely a mix of things, right?
Yep.
Like it could be that your genes make you more susceptible.
It could be.
Or there could be environmental triggers.
Right.
And it also seems to be connected to other autoimmune conditions. Like
Sure.
you might have heard of things like Sjogren's syndrome, which affects like tear and saliva production, and thyroiditis, which is inflammation of the thyroid gland.
Exactly.
So yeah, it seems like there are a lot of factors that can potentially contribute.
Absolutely. It's a complex interplay
Yeah.
of genetics, environment, and the immune system.
Right. And so we talked about the main treatment for PBC being UDCA.
Yes.
Can you just remind us again, like how that works?
Sure. So UDCA is actually a bile acid that occurs naturally in the body.
Okay.
And when you take it as a medication, it helps to improve the flow of bile from the liver. It can be very effective at slowing down the progression of the disease.
Okay.
Especially if it started early after diagnosis.
Early. Okay, so that's key.
Very key.
But we also know that UDCA isn't like a perfect solution.
Right. It's not a cure.
Yeah. And that's where molecular hydrogen comes into the picture.
That's right.
And I think when people hear that, they're like, wait a minute, hydrogen?
Yeah.
Like H2? The stuff we like learned about in high school chemistry?
Exactly.
What's that got to do with PBC?
Yeah, it's a natural question.
Yeah.
I think the buzz around molecular hydrogen, or H2, in conditions like PBC stems largely from its well-established antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects.
Okay.
So think of it this way.
Yeah.
In PBC, the damage to the bile ducts and the resulting inflammation create a lot of what we call oxidative stress.
Okay.
You can kind of imagine it like rust forming inside your cells.
Oh, it's a good analogy.
Yeah, and that's caused by harmful molecules called reactive oxygen species.
Okay.
And these can further damage cells and tissues.
Right.
Now, molecular hydrogen has this unique ability to selectively neutralize some of the most damaging of these reactive oxygen species.
So it's like a targeted cleanup crew.
Exactly. A very precise cleanup crew for those harmful molecules.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
But the paper also suggests that it does more than just that, right?
It does.
It talks about calming down inflammation.
Yes.
And even potentially reducing scarring.
Right. So research indicates that molecular hydrogen can actually interfere with several key processes involved in how PBC progresses.
Okay.
So it can directly neutralize those really aggressive reactive oxygen species, specifically hydroxyl radicals and peroxynitrite.
Okay, got it.
But beyond that, it appears to soothe inflammation by influencing important communication pathways in the body.
So, like, how does it do that?
Well, one of these pathways is called NFB.
An FFB.
NFB, think of it as like the main alarm system in your body for inflammation.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So by dialing down the activity of NFB, hydrogen can help reduce the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines.
Okay.
And these are like messenger molecules that promote inflammation.
Right.
Things like TNF alpha, IL-1 beta, and IL-6. And these all play a significant role in autoimmune and inflammatory diseases like PBC.
So it's kind of like turning down the volume on the body's like overactive inflammatory response.
That's a great way to put it.
So it's quieting things down.
Quieting things down, exactly.
And does it also help the body's own repair mechanisms?
It seems what's really interesting is that molecular hydrogen
Yeah.
also appears to activate pathways that support cellular repair and the body's natural defenses against damage.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So two key pathways that they mention are AMPK and NRF2.
Cool.
Activation of AMPK can help regulate energy balance and reduce inflammation, while NRF2 is like a master switch that turns on genes for antioxidant and detoxification enzymes.
Wow. So it's like boosting the good stuff.
It is. It's boosting the good stuff.
Okay, so we've got this sort of like multi-pronged approach.
Right.
Aimed at the core issues of oxidative stress and inflammation.
Exactly.
In PBC.
Yes.
And that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
But, you know, as we said, this paper is a case report. So it's really about one specific person.
One individual.
So let's get into that story.
Okay.
Who was this patient and, like, what was their situation?
So this was a 44-year-old man who had already been diagnosed with PBC.
Okay.
The report notes that he also had an enlarged spleen, what's called splenomegaly. Splenomegaly.
Got it.
And it was quite significant at 16.1 centimeters.
Wow. Okay, so that's pretty big.
Yeah, and importantly, he also had a high levels of a specific antibody known as IgG4.
IgG4, okay.
IgG4.
Got it.
When he was being evaluated, he was experiencing a flare-up, what we call acute cholestatic hepatitis.
Okay.
Meaning a sudden worsening of that bile flow problem.
Right.
And his liver enzyme levels were very elevated.
Okay, how elevated are we talking?
His AST was 279 ul, and his ALT was 183 ul.
And those are
significantly above the normal range.
Okay, so this wasn't just like a little bit high.
No,
this was high.
This was high.
And I think it's really important to point out that this wasn't someone who was just diagnosed and hadn't started treatment.
Right.
This report emphasizes that despite being on the standard UDCA therapy and following a specific diet,
right,
his liver enzyme levels remained high.
Stubbornly high.
Stubbornly high.
Yes.
Yeah, so it suggests that he wasn't responding as well as hoped.
Exactly.
To the conventional treatment.
Yes.
So his medical team said, okay, we need to try something else.
Right.
And they decided to add molecular hydrogen capsule therapy to his existing treatment plan.
That's right.
So this began on August 30th, 2024.
Okay.
And he took one capsule every day.
Every day.
And the paper actually specifies the product.
They do.
It was pure hydrogen from Hobo Biotech.
Interesting.
And they also mention the amount of hydrogen it delivers.
Okay.
Saying it's equivalent to the concentration found in 24 cups of 1,200 parts per billion hydrogen water.
24 cups.
Wow. I know. It's like...
It's a lot of hydrogen water.
At the very concentrated dose. So what happened after he started taking these hydrogen capsules?
Yeah, so over the following 4 months...
Okay.
The researchers observed a really remarkable improvement in his liver enzyme levels.
Okay, give me the numbers.
So by December 2024, his AST had decreased from that initial 279 ol down to 95 ol.
Wow. Okay.
And his ALT had dropped from 183 ol to 70 ol.
So both of those are huge improvements.
Huge improvement.
That's really significant.
It is. And what's also really important to note is that during this time, the patient didn't report any negative side effects.
That's right.
From the hydrogen capsule therapy.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So these are concrete numbers that show a positive change in his liver function.
Right. So we're seeing some real objective evidence here.
Exactly.
That things are moving in the right direction.
Yes.
But they also looked beyond just liver function.
They examined certain markers related to the immune system.
Okay, so tell me about that. What did they find?
So they tracked specific immune markers in his blood, KLRG1, PD1, and TIM3. Okay. Now, they noted that these markers tended to be lower than usual during PBC flare-ups.
Interesting.
Which seemed to indicate increased disease activity.
Right. So lower levels of those markers actually meant worse inflammation.
Exactly. More activity.
Okay.
However, after he started the molecular hydrogen therapy, these markers actually returned to normal levels.
Wow. Okay. So that's really promising.
It's a significant observation because it suggests that the hydrogen might be helping to regulate his immune system, which, as we know, is central to the development of PBC.
Right. So it wasn't just helping the liver itself.
Right.
It seemed to be influencing the underlying autoimmune aspect of the disease.
Exactly. It seemed to be modulating the immune response.
That's fascinating. Okay, so we're seeing changes in the blood work.
Yes.
What about like the physical condition of his liver?
Right.
Did the scans show any changes?
So the imaging studies, including ultrasound and MRI, didn't show any signs of new blockages in his bile ducts.
Okay.
Yeah. And there wasn't any significant worsening of liver scarring or fibrosis over those 4 months.
Okay.
They also used a FibroScan, which is a non-invasive way to measure liver stiffness, and those results remained stable.
So while it is a relatively short time frame, it does suggest that the disease wasn't progressing.
Right.
At least in terms of like structural damage.
In terms of structural damage, yes.
Okay. And then what about his IgG4 levels?
Yes, this is a really important finding.
Okay.
His initially high IgG4 levels actually decreased during the 4 months of hydrogen therapy.
So they went down?
They went down, yes. And this is noteworthy because elevated IgG4 levels are sometimes linked to increased autoimmune activity in certain liver diseases.
Okay.
So this reduction suggests that the hydrogen might have contributed to calming down that autoimmune response.
So again, we're seeing evidence that it's not just helping the liver function.
Right.
But it's also potentially addressing that underlying immune system dysfunction.
Exactly. It seems to be having a broader impact.
Yeah, and that's really exciting because, you know, we're always looking for ways to kind of get to the root of these autoimmune problems.
Absolutely. We want to address the underlying cause, not just the symptoms.
Right, exactly. And speaking of symptoms.
Yes.
How was this patient actually feeling?
Yeah.
Did he notice any changes in his day-to-day life?
He did, and this is really important because these subjective improvements can be so meaningful.
Absolutely, because at the end of the day, it's how you feel.
It's your quality of life.
Exactly.
So the report highlights that the patient experienced noticeable improvements in 2 very common and often debilitating symptoms of PBC.
Okay, which are?
Fatigue and itching, also known as pruritus.
Oh yeah, those can be so tough.
They can be really tough to deal with.
Yeah.
And he reported that these improvements led to a better overall quality of life.
That's great.
And you know, anyone who knows someone with a chronic condition or has one themselves, you understand just how much relentless fatigue and itching can really impact your day-to-day life.
Absolutely. It can be so draining.
It can.
So it's crucial to consider those quality of life improvements.
Absolutely.
So let's bring it all together.
Okay.
What's your expert perspective here?
Sure.
How do we connect the dots between the hydrogen therapy and all these positive outcomes?
Well, I think the improvements seen in this case likely result from the multiple ways that hydrogen interacts with the body.
Right.
Particularly its ability to fight oxidative stress,
Yeah.
which is a significant factor in PBC. So by neutralizing those damaging free radicals, it reduces the cellular harm that fuels inflammation.
Right.
And as we discussed, it also seems to modulate those key inflammatory pathways, reducing the production of harmful signaling molecules and potentially supporting the body's own repair process.
Right. So it's like it's helping on multiple levels.
It seems to be.
And the decrease in IgG4
Yes.
and the normalization of those immune markers
Right.
further support the idea that hydrogen has this regulating effect on the immune responses that are attacking the liver in PBC.
Absolutely. It points to a potential immunomodulatory role for hydrogen.
So that's really interesting. And the fact that no adverse effects were reported
Right.
is definitely a significant point in its favor.
It is encouraging. It suggests that it could be a safe add-on therapy.
Yeah, and that's always a huge consideration.
Of course, safety is paramount.
But it is important to keep the limitations in mind, right?
Absolutely.
This is just one single case report.
It is a single case.
And while it's compelling,
yeah,
it doesn't provide definitive proof that this will work for everyone with PBC.
That's right.
Right? We need much larger, carefully controlled clinical trials to confirm these findings,
We do.
to figure out the optimal dosage of molecular hydrogen, and to explore its potential benefits across a wider range of people
Absolutely.
with PBC and perhaps even other autoimmune liver conditions.
It's an exciting area for future research.
Yeah, it really is. So I guess the key insight here for you, the listener,
Yes.
is that we saw a significant
Yeah.
and measurable improvement in liver function
Right.
and potentially immune regulation
Yes.
in this one patient
In this one individual.
by adding this simple capsule
Right.
to their existing treatment.
That's quite remarkable.
So what's the main takeaway from
Okay.
this deep dive for you, our listener?
So the primary takeaway is that molecular hydrogen capsules showed promising results
Okay.
as a safe and potentially effective additional treatment for this specific patient with PBC who wasn't fully benefiting from the standard UDCA therapy.
Right.
We saw improvements in his liver enzyme levels, a move towards normal in certain immune markers,
Yeah.
a reduction in that marker of autoimmune activity.
Mm-hmm.
And importantly, he reported feeling better with less fatigue and itching.
Yeah, that's so important.
It's about improving quality of life.
Exactly.
Yep.
But we really do have to emphasize that this is just one person's experience.
Yes, it's crucial to remember that.
Right. This should not replace any medical advice
Absolutely.
you are currently receiving. And even the researchers themselves emphasize that more expensive studies are needed.
They do. More research is definitely warranted.
But I think what's so cool about this is it gives us a glimpse into potential future treatments
It does.
for PBC.
It's a peek into what might be possible.
Right. And it highlights the ongoing research efforts to find better ways to manage this
Yes.
and other autoimmune conditions,
Absolutely.
especially for those who don't respond fully
Yeah.
to current therapies.
Right.
So I guess the question that I'm left with, and I hope you are too, is could readily available interventions
Yeah.
like this play a bigger role
Good question.
in managing complex autoimmune diseases
It is.
than we currently think?
It makes you wonder.
It really does.
It does.
And what other seemingly simple molecules might hold untapped potential for improving our health?
That's a great question to ponder.
Yeah, so much to think about.
So much to explore.
All right, well, that's our deep dive for today.
Great.
Thanks for joining us,
My pleasure.
and we'll see you next time.
See you then.